Yeah, okay.
Should I go ahead and let them in?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
So it should be starting up on YouTube as well. We'll see.
Oh, wow. Cool.
Yeah, that's the intent, is to make it so that people could log in there as well.
Should I go ahead and let them in?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
So it should be starting up on YouTube as well. We'll see.
Oh, wow.
It is. Yeah,
Looks
that's
like-
the intent, is to make it so that people could log in there as well. See, I gotta mute that. Okay. It started repeating after me.
Do you have both YouTube and both of the windows open?
I do, but I just muted it. So I muted it on YouTube.
Okay.
So it shouldn't be reverberating back to us now. Hey all, thanks for coming. I'm Tyler Olson. Dr. Jeff Steiner is joining. So we're both going to be sharing this. Grace is going to be assisting with Q&A and moderating. I opened it up early in case anyone wants to just post some questions. So if you want to, then just let Grace know, and she'll put you in the queue. Otherwise, the official discussion will start at 7. So we've got about 10 minutes. And the chat should be functioning for that purpose.
Hey everyone, so we got a few questions just sent to me. So if you all want to ask your questions in this kind of early part, you can go ahead. I know Michael asked first and then Hassan, or I can read them out loud, whatever you all prefer.
Yeah, if you're so moved, just unmute yourself. If no one says anything, then Grace, you can just pose the questions.
Yeah.
I can talk. So thanks, Tyler, for doing this. I just wanted to ask, I mean, as a new intern, this is my first job. What are the basics we should really be getting started on in terms of like financial planning? Sorry if that's really broad.
That's a good question, though. You know, the two major pieces that are probably most time sensitive are student debt decisions, and then disability insurance, closely followed by employee benefits decisions, which some programs have given you the information now, and some hold out until orientation, which you're likely none of you have started that yet. But as far as like holistically, like how to approach financial planning, like those are like topics, but like foundationally, you want to understand cash flow, which is the flow of money in and out of your life. You know, in terms of your expenses. By now, hopefully most of you have been able to, you know, discern like what your rent or mortgage is going to be. You want to itemize those so you can see what money is going out. And then, you know, depending on your residency pay, it could be, if it's 45,000, 55, 60,000, you know, your take home payout is going to be like 3,000 to 3,700. So like establishing that movement of money and like what your net savings is or net loss is per month. That's the foundation of knowing what you are capable of doing beyond just living, in terms of paying off debt, especially private loans if you have those, and you know, saving in terms of your programs, 403B plan, Roth Ira contributions, and potentially more short-term purchase goals like buying a home, things like that. Jeff, did you have anything to add?
I would iterate to figuring out the public service loan forgiveness piece is probably pretty important. If you're a med student and you are single and have not filed your taxes this year, probably go ahead and file your taxes to get that $0 adjusted gross income. which will affect your student loan payments. And kind of looking at the different types of income-driven repayment plans. For most specialties, it makes sense to at least start off in the PSLF system and then change over if you decide you're not going to go that route. I think Tyler's going to kind of dive into that in our talk. But I think the big thing is just kind of getting organized. Like how does your check come into your checking account from your residency or employer? And then what are you going to do with that? Or you get paid twice a month? Is it every 15 days? Is it once a month? Just kind of having those kind of things in mind so that you get organized going in, because your intern year, you'll be so busy and it's pretty stressful. And so whatever you can do ahead of time to kind of get things organized, I think will go a long way. The big thing is the decision on the public service loan forgiveness for your student loans. Is probably the big thing that you can kind of get tucked away now. Because there are some interns that will be starting kind of mid-June. Some residencies do start a little early as orientation month or a couple weeks of orientation. And so, before that gets started and moving and all that, getting some of those things organized will go a long way for you.
Thank you both.
Great question.
Awesome. There was Hassan and Christian.
Yeah, thank you so much for hosting this. I was wondering if, I think many of us do have student loans, but in terms of kind of balancing it out with other investment opportunities, like if, let's say, we wanted to buy real estate and start that, what would you recommend on proceeding with that even before, let's say, we buy our first home? Just kind of wondering your thoughts on that.
I guess, Tyler, we should open it up with, we're not giving specific financial, legal, or accounting advice. Consult your own attorney, CFP, or accountant. We're giving educational purposes only in light of what we have here. That's to keep Tyler out of trouble.
Yeah, I mean, so as far as what you should do, it's highly variable. But like principally, you want to look at what your interest expense is on your debt. And opportunities for saving for real estate, as you mentioned, that can take some time. So that's also going to depend on how long you think you're going to be in one particular place. There is the possibility, of course, of purchasing real estate, and living somewhere else. But that is really a business decision. You are like, you can hire, you can outsource property management and all that, and that's fine. But it takes some time to get acclimated, and so you are really need to be have the mindset that you're investing in a business, and that might be slow going at first, especially because you're an intern year, so you're going to be very busy as it is. So if you do that, you want to make sure that that you understand not only the money investment involved, but also the time investment. Other investment opportunities like investing more in, your program's 403b plan, your own personal Roth IRA, or other investments, they all carry risk, and so there is the chance that they'll lose value in the short term. But if you invest with the intent of long-term investing, it's not a bad move. Whether or not to pay it off relative to debt is also related to whether or not you're going for loan forgiveness. If you are going for public service loan forgiveness, then that would be like you're paying the minimum toward debt, and then you could invest net savings beyond that. But if you are going to be paying off your debt, you want to see if you could balance something. If I had like an ideal situation, I would love to be able, as a resident, to be able to contribute to a Roth IRA Like if you could maximize it, which is not easy because that's $500 a month. So that may not be workable. But that, and then if there's money beyond that for paying off your loans, you could look at doing that. I do think it's important to not try to feel like you have to pay off your student debt during training, because it's just, if you're in the hundreds of thousands in debt, it's prohibitive to think that like you would be able to make a mentally meaningful dent in the debt. Whereas investing in a Roth IRA on a regular basis, you are putting your money in the position where it could earn, and you're putting yourself in a position where you are developing a habit of saving. And when you do that, that's very valuable. So I think, I know that's kind of a non-answer, but
I guess the follow-up question I have, when you say I want to invest in real estate, what does that mean to you? Like, are you thinking about going and purchasing land? Are you thinking about house hacking and getting a duplex and renting part out? Or when you say real estate, what are you talking about? I guess, how would you define that as a
Yeah, thank you for your answer. It's just something that I think trainees like us, we obviously get into the, I guess, quote unquote, real world pretty late, just being stuck in the training bubble. And so I feel like, a lot of, in terms of our peers who may not have pursued the medical training route, they had done like investments and things like that. I mean, I see a lot of, I feel like people buying housing and then they rent it out, or apartments and rent it out and such. So that's kind of what I was wondering, but balancing that out with obviously student loans and repayments and such. It's just interesting just to hear kind of what your perspective is, because everyone has their own 2 cents.
What program are you? Is it your intern year you're starting, or are you already in residency, or where are you?
I'm in residency. I'm in my fellowship right now.
Oh, okay. So what are you in a fellowship for?
GI.
GI. What year of fellowship?
I'm in my last year.
Oh, congratulations. So you're
Thank
about
you.
ready to get out and you graduate in June?
Yeah, but I want to be pursuing more training. So.
Oh, cool. So then I guess the question I have for you, are you pursuing public service loan forgiveness, or is that not part of the plan?
I'm not sure yet.
Okay. And, especially with you doing more training, are you going to do it in the same location as you are now?
No, going to a different location.
You're going to be moving. With you moving around, especially if you do another fellowship, which I would assume it may be a year long after that primary, or how long of a fellowship are you going to do after that?
It's probably a couple of years.
Couple
depending
years.
on how it goes, yeah.
So, in training, there's this huge rush to go out and buy a house, right? So when I was an intern, we got a house because we wanted 2 pug dogs. That was a silly reason to get a house. We stayed in the house after, so I did an anesthesia residency, did a fellowship in peds anesthesia, and then stayed on as staff. And then we stayed in the house for another 3 years after I was faculty. And when we sold it after that period of time, we lost money on it because the air conditioner went out. We had to pay to sell the house and this kind of thing. So don't feel a rush to go out and get a home. Renting buys you time, and it also pays for a lot of headaches. So when stuff breaks and that kind of thing, especially if you're doing a fellowship in another location, renting makes a lot of sense because you never know where you're going to kind of land. So that would be the other part to kind of think about as well.
Sounds good. Thank you so much.
Awesome. So we still have some questions saved, but we'll put those first at the Q&A section, which I guess starts around 7:40. So we'll go ahead and get started.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you all for joining us. We're just doing some Q&A, and we'll have some at between 7:40 and 8 p.m. After we talk about some specific topics. Now we're going to begin some discussion on student debt, disability insurance, investing, and how to protect yourself from the financial industry. And for those of you who are just beginning your training, Really appreciate that you're taking the time to do this. And those of you that are already in your training, you are incredibly busy. So I really, really appreciate that you've blocked out this time. So we're eager to make it worth the time that you've invested. First, we're going to talk about debt. Then we're going to talk about disability insurance. Then we'll talk about investing. And then finally, we'll talk about protecting yourself from the financial industry. I'm going to be talking about debt as well as investing. And Dr. Steiner, he's going to be speaking about disability insurance as well as dealing with financial advisors and how to protect yourself from the financial industry. I am a financial planner myself, so it's important you know that, but this is all about educating anyone that wants to learn, because it's my earnest belief, and I think Dr. Steiner, you share this, that the more that you each can take a hold of your own financial decisions and be your own advocates, the better off you'll be. Doesn't matter who you get help from if you do it all, or like what your situation is. If you make the decision to invest time in your own financial education, the quality of your life will improve. Ultimately, you have greater control of not just your money, but your time, especially as you get into your attending years and you start having career decisions that you can make. Money decisions really can have that impact. And it varies by person, but it behooves each of us to do this. Dr. Steiner, did you have any introductory comments before we begin?
Now, I guess Tyler has a financial planning firm. Where do I fit into this whole thing? I've been doing financial literacy for physicians for a while now. I wrote a book. It's up on Amazon. Don't buy it. I'm working on the second edition, so there's no conflict there. It's a rough book, so don't buy it yet. Wait till the second edition. But I'm here to kind of help give perspective to from a physician side. And I'm a former program director, and I've worked with the GME office on campus, and have spoken at the White Coat Investor conference. And so Tyler and he graciously invited me to kind of do this, have us give a talk with you guys and answer some questions. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
Very nice. So let's get right into talking about debt. If you have, any kind of debt, obviously technically debt is the very opposite of wealth. And so if you have debt and you're just getting out of medical school or you're in training to some degree, it's very, very common to have a lot of debt because medical school is expensive. And so there's credit card debt, there's mortgages for a home, there's car loans, there's credit card debt I mentioned. And then of course the big one is student loans. You want to be able to get rid of debt as reasonably as you can, but as a trainee, many are unable to do much about it. So if you had all those types of debt, if you had credit card debt, a mortgage, auto loan, and student loans, the first one you absolutely want to get rid of is credit card debt as soon as possible, because the interest rate is very, very high in all likelihood. And even if you were to think about investing, instead of paying off that debt, you would have to achieve so much profit in your investments. And it's really unreasonable to expect that. So credit card debt you got to get rid of it as soon as you can. The topic that is more nebulous is student loans, because it is unique in terms of its impact on each individual. Depends on how much debt you have, depends on what kind of debt it is, if it's federal loans or if it's private debt. The interest rate, and under federal loans right now, everyone's at 0, but it's going to restart sometime, potentially September 1, maybe later. And then the other really big factor is whether or not your career trajectory would allow you to benefit from public service loan forgiveness. So what I wanted to do was primarily address the income-driven repayment plans that are offered through federal loans and what PSLF requires if you want to try to meet it. Private student loans are going to be kind of treated, in my mind, like just not as bad as credit card debt, because the interest rate tends to be lower, maybe 12%, 10%, 8%. But it doesn't benefit from anything like loan forgiveness or any of these income-driven repayment plans. So we'll primarily be talking about federal student loans in this. And I'm going to share my screen to give you a summary of the two most popular income-driven repayment plans. The first one is Pay As You Earn, PAYE. It's designed to go up and down according to your income. So whatever your last reported income was, they're going to subtract what they refer to as 150% of the poverty line dollar amount from your income. So for a single person, that's about $19,000. So if you make $60,000 as a resident, you subtract $19,000, that is $41,000, and then you have to pay 10% of that, which is $4,100 per year spread out over the months. So, if you have $350,000 in debt, if you were on a traditional private refinanced repayment plan, your payment would, even if you were on a 10-year repayment, you're talking about at least $3,500 per month, which for many of you is your entire take-home pay. So these income-driven repayment plans are very useful when you're in training. Now, you'll notice here that it mentions that there's forgiveness after 20 years, which is different from public service loan forgiveness. The public service loan forgiveness, or PSLF, is a 10-year forgiveness track, but Pay As You Earn itself is a forgiveness program, but it's 20 years long. I don't meet many physicians where this is appropriate to pursue, but it's not out of the ordinary. It's not impossible. The higher your debt and the lower your attending salary is going to be, the more likely maybe you could consider this, even if you're not qualifying for PSLF, which we'll get to after we talk about pay and repay. The other benefit of Pay As You Earn is that if you're married, your partner's income can be excluded from the calculation that I mentioned at the outset. So suppose your partner makes $100,000. That $4,100 annual payment that I mentioned would be boosted by about $10,000 per year. So that's a big jump. And if you have budget issues, if your income and like your living expenses to income is very tight, that might be beneficial to look at. But you have to file your taxes separately. So you have to choose Pay As You Earn, and you have to choose to file your taxes separately. And filing separately as a married person has its own implications. When you marry jointly, you both get put under the joint tax bracket, which is different from the married filing separately bracket. You also will give up certain rights, like there's certain child tax credits that you won't be able to capture. So if you have children, you're going to owe more in taxes by filing separately. But so what you have to do is compare the cost of filing separately with the reduction in your student loan payment to be able to determine the pros and cons and whether it's worth it. Now, especially if you're going for public service loan forgiveness and you choose pay because you're married and your partner earns an income, it may be really viable to do that, because the point of PSLF, if you're really into it, is to have the bare minimum paid toward your debt so that by the end of the 10 years, you get the maximum forgiven. The last point is that there is a modest interest subsidy with pay for your subsidized loans, which is typically not very much of your loan burden. But for the first 3 years, when you choose pay, the first 3 years, they will forgive 100% of the interest on your subsidized loans that you did not pay by means of this payment amount. Now, conversely, revised Pay As You Earn, it has the same 10% of discretionary income marker, but the interest subsidies is better. Subsidized loans is 100% for 3 years, 100% of unpaid interest for 3 years on your subsidized loans, and 50% of the unpaid interest on unsubsidized loans. But after 3 years, it all gets relegated to a 50% marker, what I mean is that your entire federal student loan burden, whatever interest you do not pay on both your subsidized and unsubsidized loans, the government will forgive half of that unpaid interest. So that can be beneficial if you're kind of middle of the road, like, I don't know if I'm going for PSLF, but I'm in training, so I got to pick an income-driven repayment plan anyway. repay can be a good option because it still qualifies you for PSLF, but it prevents the loan from ballooning as much as pay. I tend to say, like, if you are like, yeah, I am going for PSLF, if you're single, you could go for repay and you could change to pay later. But if you're married and you know you're going for PSLF, then you could, then picking pay and filing your taxes separately is often a good consideration. And then the third option of like, there's like, I am going for PSLF, I might go for PSLF, and I'm definitely not going for PSLF. So I know a number of people in emergency medicine who they see like their path where they're headed. Or like, I know I know a couple of urologists who are like, I want to go into private practice. I am not going to work for a nonprofit organization. You could go with revised pays you earn during training, because the interest rates are ridiculous. They're like 6-7%, but repay essentially reduces that interest expense by less than half. It's like between like 40, you get like about a 40 to 45% reduction in the interest expense. So some people think about refinancing because they could get to a lower interest rate. Well, repay effectively does that with this interest subsidy. And now the third thing I wanted to mention was the Pslf requirements themselves. Now you have to be on one of those income-driven repayment plans, so it'd have to be on pay, repay. I didn't talk about IBR or ICR, but those are the four. You have to pick one of those 4 income-driven repayment plans. You have to be employed full-time by the US government or a state government or a local government. You have to have direct loans, and you have to make 120 qualifying payments. So repay and pay, they both fit on this. So if you're not sure if you're going to go for PSLF, and many trainees don't know what's going to, what they ultimately are going to do until, maybe 2 years before your training is done at best, and that's okay. So that's the one benefit of these plans, is they can help you to budget your life, put your loans onto a track that you can make it on autopilot, and then when it's time to make decisions because you have more facts, then you can decide, am I going to stay on this income-driven repayment plan because I'm going to see it through for 10 years for PSLF? Or no, I know I'm going to go into private practice and I'm going to refinance. So in a nutshell, these are the decisions that have to be made as far as student debt. And I would welcome your questions. And I know there's lots of variability in like what your questions may be. If you have questions about debt, DM me on Twitter at Olson Planner, OLSONPLANNER. I welcome your questions anytime individually. So if you don't get a chance to ask your question today, don't hesitate to reach out to me there. Jeff, would you be open to now talking about disability insurance?
Sure. If I can share my screen. Let's see. Okay. So disability insurance. It's interesting. This is one of the hot topics that is important to talk about when you're a physician. Some financial planners who don't work with physicians don't quite understand why it's so important, but it is really important. And I'd like to start off with, even pirates had disability insurance. So when they looked at their articles of agreement, in there it was written out when they get the plunder, if they lose an eye, how much money they'll get. If they lose a leg or a hand, it was all written into the articles of agreement. So if pirates had disability insurance, absolutely physicians need disability insurance. So disability insurance, you cannot go and buy it directly on your own. You have to go through either an agent or a broker. So an insurance agent is somebody who works directly for one company. An insurance broker is somebody who is independent and can shop different companies to find the best deal for you. You'll definitely want to go with an insurance broker so that they can take your information and figure out the best place to go. Now, be aware there is what they call in the industry a pink price tag for women who are shopping for disability insurance. There are some disability insurance that will cost you more because you're a biological woman. And so just kind of keep that in mind as you go through. And really, we ought to back up a little bit. And what is disability insurance? I think it has kind of a bad brand to it. Think of it like paycheck insurance. You want money, you want insurance to cover you if you're unable to work as a physician. So it replaces your income if you're disabled. And there are really two types. They're group disability insurance that you get from your employer or your residency, and individual, and that's what you buy on your own. And really, when should you get disability insurance? Ultimately, you want to get disability insurance before you have a pre-existing issue. And these are, with disability insurance, it's not covered by health insurance or life insurance. And really, the disability insurance basics for you to kind of give you some background. It's designed to replace 45 to 60% of your income. And it really, how do you define disabled? Is it total disability, or is it own occupation? And so for physicians, you definitely want to look at policies that are own occupation specialty specific. I went into peds anesthesia because I love taking care of kids as an anesthesiologist. I do not want to go to clinic. I don't want to read x-rays. I want to, if I cannot work in my specific specialty, then I want to be able to have coverage for that. And why is disability insurance so complicated and expensive? It really is a gray area. So life insurance is very binary. You're either alive or you're dead, one or the other. Disability insurance, it kind of becomes gray in that when are you disabled? Someone who has a surgical specialty, like otolaryngology, where you're going in doing middle ear surgery or mastoidectomies or something like that, you have to have a lot of fine motor skill. And if you lose that fine motor skill, you will not be able to operate as an otolaryngologist. And so it's expensive because it's based on how much you earn. And as a ballpark, you'll pay somewhere between 2 to 6% of your benefits as the premium. And why do you need it? As a 30-year-old, you're 4 times as more likely to be disabled than die. And you have a 1 in 7 chance of needing disability insurance sometime during your life. And the thing with disability insurance, if you've seen one policy, you've seen one policy. Every policy is a little different. They start off with a base policy, which gives you some factors like how long will they pay you, how much will it cost, what kind of benefits you get. And then you also have riders that go on top of that. So this really, you use these riders to kind of add more to the policy and give you better coverage. So common riders you'll see is like a cost of living adjustment, future increase option, partial disability, lump sum benefit, all these kind of things. But really what I want you to key in on is the own occupation specialty specific. Now, there are some of you that might have had an insurance company come and talk to your med school or residency, and some people might have signed up for disability insurance. When you look at the 6 companies that provide disability insurance for physicians in the country, there are really 6 of them that really give a strong definition of own occupation specialty specific. There are Meritas, Ohio National, Guardian, Principal, Mass Mutual, or the Standard. So if you go to a program and they have group disability insurance and it's sold by a company, you'll want to find out, okay, well, who is actually the insurance company that's providing it for you? And so when you go, you'll want to talk to an insurance broker. You want to first put your personal policy in place before you get group insurance. Now, when you work with a broker, you need to work with a broker who works with physicians. This is very important. There are some people that will try and sell you disability insurance who don't understand the nuances of working with physicians. For example, there was a pretty popular physician who does a lot of finance talk. He went to somebody to get disability insurance. He had a pre-existing condition. The broker should have found out about this and not even applied for the disability insurance, because once you apply for disability insurance, if you're denied, you have to wait 7 years before you can apply again. So if you have a pre-existing condition, it may be better for you to get a group disability insurance that you may be able to use to convert over to a personal policy later than to get the personal policy first. And this is where it takes getting a good broker who knows what they're doing, who can kind of walk you through the process so you don't trip up on any landmines. And so we'll, disability insurance is expensive. And as a resident, you'll say, well, how in the world can I afford it? You can get a base policy with a future increase option, meaning they look at your current salary, they base how much you pay every month or annually as to what kind of benefit you'll get as a resident. And then when you become an attending, you're able to show them the increase in salary that you have. And you don't have to go through the underwriting process, which is looking at your medical history and this kind of thing. In the state of Texas, they did a study and they looked at residents before they started residency and after. And most of them, I say most, there's a fair percentage of residents that ended up having a condition at the end of residency that was either going to increase the premium or would disallow them from getting disability insurance. So again, it's on one of the to-do list of things to do when you start out in residency, definitely before you graduate. If you're getting close to graduating from residency or fellowship, consider getting the personal disability insurance first in place. Because if you become an attending, let's say nothing happens, you're not injured or anything, and you decide to get the group insurance first, well, when you get the private policy, they limit how much benefit you'll be able to pay for. So get the personal policy in place first, then get the group policy. The personal policy you take with you wherever you go. It usually has a lot better terms to it. It is more expensive, but it gives you better protection. Did you want to add anything, Tyler?
Jeff's, we had a question in the chat, which I think is really good. If our training program offers disability insurance, should we still look for disability insurance beyond that?
You could take a look at it. My institution offers group. It's actually through the standard. I called them up to find out who the company was. It depends. There's some people who want to just go ahead and get group insurance and be done with it. Others, it may be worth kind of shopping around, going to a broker and having them shop specifically for you for personal disability, and get that in place before you get the group in place. Like I said, it can get pretty expensive. But one of the keys is if you build your budget in a way, if you're able to pay the premium annually, you usually get a discount on it, and it can be significant. I think that you just have a lot more options with the personal disability insurance than you do with the group. But if like going through the process of getting a broker and going and having them shop and doing all those things, if it's such like a huge task and you're like, I'm not going to do it, then consider going with the group. I mean, having something in place is better than postponing and then not being able to get it later on. What would you think, Tyler?
Yeah, I mean, it's partially a matter of cash flow. Like, do you have it? Is it possible? And then it's also personal risk assessment. I know people who they look at their health and they're like, I don't feel like it's a high risk and it's not worth it, and I'd rather direct the money elsewhere, because we are talking $150, $200, $250 a month. It's not cheap to get your own policy. The primary benefit is not protecting your current income as a trainee. It is protecting your current state of health. Because anything that happens between now and when you get your own personal policy, the insurance companies will look at health events, both physical and mental, and they will exclude many they'll exclude disabilities from such pre-existing conditions.
Yeah.
So it's just, and this isn't to like, to compel by fear. There's more than one right way here. So if you feel like it's just not reasonable for you, I just go by the mantra of getting your own personal policy as soon as you can reasonably afford it, because you've spent so many years in training in order to have the flexibility of being able to provide for yourself and family and to be able to continue to save. You can't just be replacing bare minimum income. The point of being able to like bring up that coverage to like the attending level, even if it's above and beyond your living expenses, is because you still have to save, because disability insurance, it typically runs out at age 60 or 70 at the latest. And so then what are you going to do after that? So you got to be able to make sure that you're maximizing your coverage. It's a tax on the physician's salary, but if you were to suffer a disability that prevented you from being able to do your work fully or partially, it's gonna, and you don't have coverage, it will change your life completely.
There are 3 questions in the chat box. I'm going to kind of combine 2 of them because they're related. Can you start out with a group policy during residency, then switch to personal policy before graduating residency? Yes, you can. Just be aware they may limit you in that personal policy because you already have a group policy in force as to how much you can get, but you may be able to get a future increase option so that when that group policy goes away, you'd be able to increase your personal. And the follow-up question was, will you need to get reevaluated after residency? No, once you get the personal policy in place, it's done. So that's the importance of go ahead and getting the personal policy in place. Where you do get reassessed is if you have a future increase option, you can show them how much money you'll be earning, and then they'll say, okay, for that increase in benefit, you'll have to pay an increase in premium. There's another question about how bleak is our disability insurance outlook if we have multiple chronic medical conditions in childhood. People in this situation would probably benefit from group disability, because most group disability insurance policies will say something along the lines of, have you ever been denied insurance in the past? And then what is the other question they ask? I mean, it's pretty broad, and for most people, you'd be able to qualify for the group insurance. Do you remember what the second one was, Tyler? Something like, are you currently under the care of a physician or something like that? It may be, or do you have a condition that you haven't been diagnosed with something like that? So for someone like that, looking at disability insurance, the group is probably the way to go. And so that would be a situation where if you went for the personal and got denied, you could talk with a broker, and that's the beauty of a broker, independent broker. They can kind of shop around and find the best deal for you, and see what kind of groups would insure you. And sometimes brokers have contacts at different insurance companies, and they can have sidebars. I'm going to have a conversation that didn't really happen. Let's say I have a person that came to me that has diabetes, type 1 diabetes. Would you guys insure, and what kind of limitations? So it may be a way to go. It is harder, potentially harder, but not impossible. To be clear, if our program offers short-term disability insurance, this is insufficient. We need long-term, right? Correct. So short-term will only last for maybe a year, something like that. A lot of times, look into the short-term disability, though. That can be helpful if you're planning on going on maternity leave. And I know some residents that sign up for the short-term disability so that they get a paycheck once they run out of their paid time off while they're on maternity leave. And residency programs have gotten much better about allowing residents away from training for a longer period of time and not having to make it up at the end. There are a lot of specialties that have changed those policies. So that's a good thing, I think, for physicians and for growing our families. Okay.
Jeff, I just want to mention one thing. There's several good independent insurance brokers that I know. One that I've known for several years, his name is Michael Relvis. I put his website in the chat. He is exactly the sort of person that Dr. Steiner was mentioning. There's more beyond him, but he's the person that I know. I don't have a business relationship with him or a financial incentive to promote him. I just know he does good work. So if you're looking for someone to talk to who would not be beholden to any particular insurance company, talk to him. He's a good option. There's someone else too on Twitter. The name of his company is beyond me right now, but I think his name is Brock Buckles. He sounds like a cowboy.
No, I thought Brock. I thought he did disability insurance for financial planners, but I don't know if he does them for physicians as well.
Well, he does facilitate insurance contracts for other financial planners.
Okay.
I haven't used him for that. I know that he has worked with some physicians. Thank you,
Okay.
Brendan. It's called BC Brokerage.
Okay.
Yeah, so those are the two companies that I know firsthand that they do good work. But yeah, it's an important thing to get done, and especially once you become an attending and you do have more of the disposable income, it is not cheap, but you absolutely should get it, even if you have a good group policy through your current employer, because if you ever leave there and something happens with your health in the meantime, you may have trouble getting coverage after you leave that employer, and you don't want to be stuck. You don't want to, if you ever leave an employer, there must be there is often a strong reason to do so. And if disability insurance is holding you back, that can start to create some life, some quality of life issues. So it's good to be able to create that freedom so that you can make some good decisions for yourself and do what you need to do.
And it's not unusual that programs will bring in people. In the way that I would evaluate people that come in, one, are they an independent broker? Can they shop multiple companies? And then the other thing I would ask them was, well, what companies do you shop? And if they don't mention the six, I mean, a broker should be able to shop your health history around those 6 places to get you the best deal. If they only offer up like one place, then they probably aren't a good fit. And they also have to look for someone who works with physicians. I think Michael Relvis is pretty well known in the physician finance community. And so it seems like a lot of people recommend him. So that, if you had no idea where you wanted to start, probably starting with him or Brock Buckles would probably be the way to go.
Yeah.
Do you want to transition to our next topic?
Yeah. So the third one is about investing, and in the world of financial planning, investing sounds very ominous to many people if you don't know about it. And so the best thing that you could do to start, though, is just to start educating yourself on it. So there's two links that I wanted to share with you. That is for the purpose of encouraging you all to self-educate. The first is Bogleheads. Jack Bogle is a founder of Vanguard Group. He's the one that initiated the concept of index funds. If you've heard of index funds but don't know what they are, they're essentially an enormous basket of companies that if you buy into an index fund, you are essentially taking a very small ownership in all of the companies that are in that index. The S&P 500 index is the most popularly known, and it is the 500 largest companies in terms of how the general public values them. So like the amount of shares of ownership that are out there in the world for anyone to buy and sell of that company, multiplied by the share price, the companies like Apple and Amazon and Tesla are all up there. So the 500 largest companies are in the S&P 500. So if you buy an S&P 500 index fund, you are buying a small portion, very, very small portion of each of those 500 companies. Bogleheads.org is a great forum for people that want to at least dabble in DIY investing. Or if you want to ask questions, it's a great community to be able to find out how to invest. And this is particularly important because and this kind of will dovetail with with our last topic about protecting yourself, because the far majority of the financial industry, investment advisors, registered representatives, insurance brokers, it all centers on insurance products and investing money. And if you can understand investments, even if you don't want to do it yourself, even if you in the future decide like, I'd like to hire some help, having that knowledge base will help protect you, because you'll understand, even if there's someone that you're going to trust with your money, or you're going to trust with your mind in making decisions, you know to some degree what is going on. And that's very, very important. So I really encourage every one of you to take a look at that forum and participate if you want to. The second link is a company called Motley Fool. They have their own lineup of like investment funds. They're not, I don't really dabble into those too much, but they have a number of blog pieces that are helpful. And there's a nice one about what index funds are and how to invest in them. You can take advantage of investments that are within your 403B plan that's at your program, if it works to do that, especially if your program offers a matching contribution. You should take advantage of that. The index fund idea and like Bogleheads and looking into that could really help you in making decisions about what to invest in a Roth IRA. The reason why I make that distinction is because many people don't realize that the Roth IRA is not an investment. It is an account type. So like you have your checking account and your savings account. Well, you also have a Roth IRA, which is a different type of savings account. And it has a number of protections from taxation in the interim. So you should take advantage of those and learn about those. I'm just going to post in the chat. Did that come up? Yeah. If you click on that link, you'll see how to open up your own Roth IRA. It's on my Twitter feed. So there's a lot of different ways we could go with investing, but the first thing that we wanted to share with you today is to learn something for yourself so you can understand the basics of investing and then start moving forward on decisions within the realm of your program's 403B plan and your personal Roth IRA. Jeff, did you have anything to add on this?
Yeah. When you look at index funds and mutual funds, so let's start off with the very basic. What is a stock? A stock is partial ownership in a company. And what is a bond? A bond is a loan to a company. And so when people talk about stocks and bonds, you can buy a stock in a company like Tesla, Google, Apple, whatever, Walmart, or you can get a bond, and a bond can either be for a government or for a company. And so what people do is they tend to take stocks and bonds because stocks tend to move around quite a bit, right? They're more volatile. The price will change. The bonds don't tend to change as much, but they don't tend to grow as much. So what people do is they look at the stock and the bond kind of ratio to figure out how they're going to invest, like at a really basic level. And with mutual funds are baskets of stocks or bonds or both. And so there are some things called like a lifestyle fund. And what those are, they have stocks and bonds in a certain ratio, depending on when you would plan to retire. As you get closer to retirement, the more bond ratio, the bonds will go up in that ratio to be more conservative, so it's not as volatile, okay? So when you're looking at like, the problem is that they did a study, right? And they showed that the more mutual funds they offer in a retirement plan, the more likely is people won't invest in any of them because it's just, oh my gosh, it's a paradox of choice. Where do I begin? If you have no idea where to begin, first, your homework is if you have a retirement account that you're contributing to at work, find out how you're invested. That's your first homework, because you may think you're invested in something, but it may just be going into like a checking account equivalent, a money market account. So that's your first homework. Find out how you're invested and why. So that's where you're going to start. And if you have like no idea where to get started, and at least start with a lifestyle fund. Learn about that. And the thing with financial literacy, it's not like medical school. Medical school, you learn just in case information, right? So Bartonella Henselay, cat scratch fever. I learned that in 2002. Have I ever treated anyone with cat scratch fever? Have I ever had to learn how to do the antibiotics for Bartonella Henselay? Never. Personal finance is just in time education. You just have to learn enough to just kind of take the first few steps. There are very few catastrophic decisions you'll make as a resident that you can't recover from. And residency is about building habits. So one of your habits with investing is go learn about some index funds. Go learn what is in your 401k at work or 403b, and what are your options, and go look at them and look at the expense ratio and how much is it costing me to invest in that mutual fund, and then start there. So that's going to be part of your homework.
Hey, Jeff, what's an expense ratio?
So an expense ratio is how much money it costs when you invest to invest in that mutual fund. So when you talk about index funds, you want to kind of look for passively managed index funds, meaning they use an algorithm to determine what stocks and bonds are in that mutual fund. An actively managed fund, you have a fund manager who is actively buying and selling stocks and bonds for that mutual fund in an effort to try and do better than the average of the market. And so an actively managed fund is going to cost you a lot more, like on the percentage of 1 to 3% of your investment to be in that fund, whereas a passively managed, like at Vanguard, is like 0.03%. So when you're trying to figure out like where to get started, if you kind of lean more toward like the lower expense ratios, you'll probably do better in the long run.
All right, thank you for that. Now, why don't we talk about our last topic, which I think is to you.
Okay. Did you want to hold the questions in the box for?
Oh, okay. So what am I supposed to?
Shouldn't.
So, okay. So there is some benefit to consider contributing to your program, even if they're not matching, in that if you are like really confident that you're going to go for public service loan forgiveness, contributing to something that is pre-tax, which means you're going to get a deduction for the contribution that reduces your taxable income, and that reduces the amount that you pay on your loans in the subsequent year. So that boosts forgiveness. So to the degree that you are really certain that your career track is going to match with PSLF, you may want to consider putting money into your 403b, even if your program does not match. If it does match, you should absolutely put in at least the match. But beyond that, I tend to prioritize Roth IRA contributions, because the cost of putting money into a Roth IRA as a trainee is significantly less expensive than it will be as an attending. The reason why is because, whatever amount you do, 1,000, 2,000, 4,000 a year, that amount is like at the top of your income. And right now, if it's at like the $60,000 range, the amount of taxation at that level is much lower than what the top of your income is going to be as an attending, where your tax liability is very possibly going to be double that. So what that means is that your take-home pay, the amount of money that goes through the taxation of Social Security and Medicare and federal and state tax, it gets more expensive to pass through that corridor into your checking account. And that's where the Roth IRA money comes from. So you should take advantage of that as a trainee as much as possible.
And then one of the questions was, if you can only afford to do a Roth or a 403b, which one should I choose? Kind of back to Tyler's answer of, if you're doing PSLF, you'll want to go a traditional route to reduce your adjusted gross income, to reduce your salary legally, which will also reduce your payments. And for some people, people get really caught up in the Roth IRA. And you know what? If it's just easier for you to contribute at work and have it automatically pulled out of your paycheck and you don't have to worry about it, just do it. Do that. That's much better than having money come to your checking account and say, oh, I need to do a Roth IRA. And then you get busy and then it never really makes it there, which I see happen a lot because you just get busy and life happens. So whatever one, there's really no wrong way to do it except to, cash it out. So just either one or the other, and you'll be doing okay. I think the good Dr. Mix has a great question. She's like, hey, I'm going to start my intern year. I'm going to be there for 1 year, and then I'm going to go somewhere else. Now it offers a match. What should I do? The thing to find out about the company match, she also said vested. What does vested mean? When you're vested, it means whatever money is in that account is yours to take with you when you leave. For example, most of the time when you put money into a retirement account like a 403b, you are automatically invested in all the money you personally put in. Now, there are some companies that have a vesting structure where you have to be an employee with them for a certain amount of time to be vested, to have the match. They'll put the match money in, but if you leave before the vesting period happens, you don't get to take that with you, and that's okay. So what I would do is find out, Dr. Mix, I'd find out, hey, if they do the match, how much of it is vested when you leave? I know there are some places like if you are there for 2 years, you get 20%. If you're there for 3 years, you get 40, 4 years, you get 60% of whatever they add. So just kind of that's going to be your homework, is to find out of the amount of match money, how much of it is invested. And the nice thing is with that 403b, after that first year, when you go to your new employer, you can then roll your 403b into your new employer's plan, or you can roll it into an IRA. Now, if you roll it into the next employer's plan, everything's together. You can work with it. It won't preclude you from a Roth IRA, which is a whole backdoor Roth, which is a whole other discussion in and of itself. But that would be a pretty good way to go. So the question would ask, if they do the match, how much it is invested after a year, and is that something you want to participate in? Would you prioritize a Roth IRA over HSA during residency? What do you think, Tyler?
Yeah, I was thinking about this. So part of it is going to be like why you're putting money into the HSA, because the health savings account gets you a deduction that you then correspondingly can use for medical expenses. So if you are someone who has ongoing medical care, or your family members do, then it can be beneficial to like reduce your cost of medical expenses to contribute to it. And in that case, it might be helpful to contribute to the HSA. But if you're not in that state where it'd basically be accumulating, I would attribute it similarly to the 403b contribution. It's pre-tax, so you're going to reduce your taxable income compared to a Roth. If you don't contribute to a Roth as a trainee, then the benefit of the Roth is that you are putting in money that can grow on a tax-free basis. Let me give you an example. Just like the concept of, let's see, where did that go? I was going to share this with you all. The concept of compounding interest, which we haven't talked on too much, is powerful. And if you were to take if you had $100 and you started contributing $500 a month in 20 years with investments profiting at about 7% on average, that's going to grow to almost $250,000. And that's because it's not just like, you put in 120, but now it's grown to 126,000. In your pre-tax 403b plan, that $126,000 and the $120,000 is going to get taxed when you take it out. But in this case, because if you had put it in a Roth, all of that is going to be tax-free. So the 120 that you put in, you didn't get a deduction for that anyway, so there's no income tax. But you're also not going to pay income taxes on that $126,000 that it grew by. So to be able to have money accessible to you during retirement in this state where there's no tax liability for withdrawing it, that creates flexibility, creates an opportunity for decisions. As an attending, you will want to prioritize pre-tax because your income is going to be so much higher. You want to beat down that taxable income. So that's it's kind of flip-flops in my mind. As a trainee, if you are of the mindset, do the Roth. I do agree with you, Jeff, in that like if you're just feeling overwhelmed about it and you need to just do something, have it just taken from your salary through your 403B plan. And some of them even offer a Roth option where you can contribute on a Roth basis. But then as an attending, you will definitely want to find every single pre-tax opportunity that is available to you through your employer. So, but I mean, HSA is also pre-tax. So if you have health things that need to be considered, that might be a good idea. But if not, I would tend to steer toward the Roth.
I'll give a counter argument to the HSA versus Roth. It's somewhat difficult to do an HSA when you're a resident. One, you can put more money into a Roth IRA than you can to an HSA, and HSA is a health savings account. In order to contribute to a health savings account, you have to be in a high deductible healthcare plan in order to put money into it. So you put money into it, you get a tax break because you don't pay taxes on it. It grows tax-free. You pull it out and you don't have to pay taxes on it either. There is a, Fidelity does a study every year that they update, and they find that in 2022, a 65-year-old will need $315,000 in their retirement just for healthcare expenses in their retirement. So, one option would be you put money into the HSA, and the beauty of it, I can put money in my HSA in 2022. I cannot, I'll save up for the next 20 years, let it grow tax-free. And then if I pull it out for healthcare related expenses, I don't pay taxes on it, which means I can take my receipts from 2022 and say, this is what I'm reimbursing myself for, and get that money out of there tax-free. It's a really kind of wacky, it's like they call it I forgot what the nickname they have, the super Roth or something like that someone's come up with, but
a mega backdoor Roth, you mean?
No, they had some slang word for it, but if you're like debating with yourself between a Roth IRA and an HSA, like you're doing a lot of stuff right if you're at that point. So don't feel like you have to get too much into the weeds on it, that you miss out on the big picture.
Yeah. I've been asking some great questions.
Oh yeah. Do we want to hold for the backdoor Roth? We'll talk about financial advisors, and then and then we'll swing back through. Are you cool with that?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay. So financial advisors. I was of the mindset a while ago that like every physician passed organic chemistry, and personal finance is not organic chemistry. It's a lot easier. It just is. And I was always of the assumption that like, you can do this yourself. I know the white coat investor is a big proponent of doing it your own. You don't need a financial advisor. By the time you learn enough about finances, you don't need one. And I came to the realization that some people, unlike Tyler and I, that really love this subject, some people just really would rather have someone else deal with it for them. And that's okay. And so when you work with a financial advisor, it's just important that you kind of know what you're getting yourself into. And so when a lot of people think of a financial advisor, they're like, hey, this is someone who's going to look out for me. They're going to take care of my money. I always get a little nervous when I hear a resident say, when I usually approach a subject of finance with somebody, and they say, oh, I don't have to worry about that. I've got a money man. And I get a little nervous when they reply to him as a money man, because what does that mean and what have they been sold? And the reason is this. In the financial industry, there are a lot of conflicts of interest. And for a financial planner, these conflicts of interest may impact how they work with you as a client. And so financial planners kind of have two different they have all these titles. And what do the titles mean? And they're really regulated professionals and non-regulated titles. So the regulated professionals, these are like certified financial planner, certified financial analyst, registered life planner, enrolled agent, certified student loan professional, all these regulated professionals. They've had education, they've taken an exam, and they have some kind of experience requirement for them to be able to use those initials. The non-regulated titles, financial advisor, financial planner, wealth manager, wealth advisor, wealth coach, financial coach, I could put any one of those titles on a business card today and walk out there and try and sell you something that you don't need, and I would be completely okay. So when you're starting to kind of evaluate financial planners that you want to work with, first start with the regulated professionals, right? Well, what if they're not a regulated professional? So how do you work with somebody who may not have one of the designations? Start off with three things. One, look at the training. How did they get their personal finance training? Did they go to school? Do they have a master's? I mean, there are some people that do financial planning that have a lot of education in undergraduate and a master's program, but they don't have a regulated title, and that's okay. And then look at the experience. How much experience do they have planning and advising? How long have they been doing this for? Did they just get out of school? What is their experience level? And then also look at, do they work with physicians? And the next question is, why do you work with physicians? Because in the financial industry, the physicians have kind of a big target on ourselves because we're very trusting. We assume that people are going to do what's in our best interest. And sometimes we're sold things that we really shouldn't be sold to. And the biggest kind of problem that we have between medicine and financial industry is this. Medicine, we have one standard, right? The gold standard. We do what's in the best interest of our patient. I mean, that is drilled into us from day one. The problem with the financial industry, they have kind of two different standards. And those standards are just, they have the suitability standard and the fiduciary standard. And I want you to think about it this way. Suitability standard means if it is suitable for the client, I can do it for them. I can sell them an insurance policy. I can have them have a mutual fund that I get a kickback on. As long as it's suitable, which is a very low bar to reach, it's okay. Versus a fiduciary standard. Fiduciary standard means I'm going to do what's in the best interest of the client. There is right now in the financial industry a lot of debate going on about the fiduciary standard and that kind of thing. So first question that you kind of ask a planner is, what standard do you fall under? And they may say, well, sometimes I do fiduciary, sometimes I do suitability. You know, you want them to really nail it down. You want to get it in writing too, that they will provide to you the fiduciary standard. So one way that you can kind of see the conflicts of interest of how financial planners are paid. One is commission-based. If they sell you a product, they get a commission off of that. Now, obviously, there's a conflict of interest there because they may sell you something that is going to provide to them the most bang for the buck and get the highest commission. That's why you see a lot of people selling whole life insurance, because the commission that they get off whole life insurance is somewhere between 80 to 110% of the first year premiums. So if you have a financial planner that sells whole life insurance, they can sell 4 whole life insurance policies in a year and make more than a pediatrician. So there's a huge conflict of interest there. Now, from commission-based, you have another on the total end of the spectrum. The other end of the spectrum is fee only, meaning you pay the financial planner a fee, not based on what they sell you, what they do for you, any of that. It's a flat fee, and it may be for a project that they do or an hourly or something like that. So you know exactly what you're paying for. And then there's something in between called fee-based. And that's where it gets really tricky, because you may talk with somebody and they say, oh, I'm fee-based. Fee-based means that they sell insurance and they also do the fee only. So they kind of straddle the fence between the two areas. And I would recommend going with fee only. And the fee only have kind of a couple different structures. One's fee only, which is like hourly, flat fee, or retainer. Assets under management has a little bit of conflict of interest, meaning whatever assets they manage for you, they get a percentage of that. But at least you know what you're paying for. So you're going to go work with a financial planner. You find out they work with physicians, and you're like, how do I check up and find out where all the conflicts of interest are? Well, you can ask for their ADV2A. It sounds like something from Wally, but it really tells you how they get paid. Any way that they get paid in the financial industry, they have to disclose it on this form. This will let you know, do they get a commission or fee finder if they send you to a particular lawyer? Do they get fee finder if they send you to a particular disability insurance person? Like, where are all the conflicts of interest? The other thing you can do is look them up on finra.org under broker check. And this will allow you to find out what kind of financial licenses they have. Have they had any issues? You know, I'm not worried if someone had some fine for a minuscule amount, like $1,000 or something like that. It's going to be there. The broker knows about it. You can ask them about it. What I worry about are some of the financial planners that have worked with some of our residents that have had their license pulled in multiple states, who've been under investigation by the SEC multiple times. And they're selling products to residents that they don't need to be having. So check up on your planner, look for fee-only financial planner that works with physicians, because our financial lives are very different than most of the people in the population. Then you can always ask them, like, how did you choose to work with physicians? And is it, oh, I work with physicians and I work with lawyers and dentists. And if it's like, I work with everybody, then they may not be a good fit for you, because it's just, you want someone specialized working with physicians to give you the best advice and kind of mentorship that you can. So I'll stop sharing and we can get into the chat boxes.
Thanks, Jeff. That was a really good explanation of things, how to protect yourselves.
Would you add anything else to it, Tyler?
Just like, you always want to ask for references. You want to find people who have worked with them that you can trust, to get some context around them as a person. You want to ask them questions about like what they care about. Or you could even just try to pay attention to, like, are they more interested in their solutions, or are they more interested in your problems? How do they listen? Do they interrupt you? The financial industry is primarily a bunch of white guys like me. And so there's a propensity to ignore people of color. There's a propensity to ignore women. So if you're a couple, like, I've actually been in on virtual meetings where, like, the financial person just keeps, like, directing the conversation back to the husband and ignores his wife. That is no good, because this is so personal. So you want to look at, like, the quality of them as a human too, and how well they respect you, and what is important to you. So that's all that I had to add. I'm gonna have to wrap up. And I think I answered all the questions that were in the chat, but I mentioned here at the end that if you have additional questions that didn't get answered today, you're welcome to send me a DM on Twitter. If you don't have a Twitter account, you should just get one, because it's free financial education. Come on. My handle is OLSONPLANNER. Jeff, do you have anything that you want to share, like blog or your handle or anything?
I'll put up my handle. I got onto Twitter because I did a blog post on the American Society of Anesthesiologists website, and they said, what are your socials? I'm like, I don't have any. So I did a Twitter, opened up a Twitter handle. That's how I met Tyler, and I've met some really great people through there. My DMs are open as well. I think Tyler does a fantastic job at answering questions on there. Thank you, everyone who came and hung out with us and spent your valuable time. How much time do we have for questions for you, Tyler?
If you want to stay on, you can answer. I do have to depart though. So I could leave it open if people want to stay.
Okay.
If you would like to.
Yeah, I can hang out for a little bit.
Yeah. This is how we tend to do things, right?
That's okay. I think my kids are a little bit older than yours too.
Yeah, no, I have bedtime routine and I take it very seriously.
Yeah, that's important. If you all have questions, definitely follow Tyler. He gives out a lot of free education about personal finance. He works with physicians, and he's on my very short list of financial planners that I recommend to people. So he is not paying me to say that. I say that freely. And so I think it's important if you don't want to do it on yourself or on your own, find someone to help you, and find somebody who you can join for a while, and you may get the hang of it, and they may graduate, and you do it on your own later. I mean, just because you start with a financial planner doesn't mean you're destined to be with them the rest of your life. I mean, you may grow enough that you're like, I got this. But I think getting organized is definitely a good way to go. I'm happy to hang out longer. And thank you for Tyler for setting this up.
Yeah, for sure. Another thing I would just mention is as trainees, I think a lot can be accomplished on your own before you have to pay for a planner. The majority of people that I work with are attendings, and it's because that's when the really big decisions have to be made and a lot more time needs to be delved into. I think if you apply everything that we've learned today, many are able to avoid having to work with a financial advisor or planner. So yeah, but I'm going to depart, but actually, Grace, did you have questions that had mounted up?
So there was just one at the very beginning. Christian Betancourt and Sawyer Bawick both had questions at the beginning that we had saved from before, and I'm not sure if one or both of them got answered.
Yeah, so if you want to hang out a bit longer, that's totally fine. I'm going to part ways though. It was really nice to spend time with you all. I'm going to leave the room open, and Grace and Jeff and the rest of you, I'll see you all.
Okay.
I'll see you all in the
Sounds
20.
good. Thanks, Tyler.
Cool.
What were the questions, Grace?
Yeah, so the first one is, can we apply for PSLF while only on a preliminary position at a residency at the moment? Also, how do we apply for PSLF?
Yeah, so with PSLF, the student loan program is the most complex financial program out there. Yes, you can apply when you're in a prelim program. You'll want to, because if you don't know exactly where you're going to end up or where you're going to land, starting off in the PSLF as a resident is a good default to go into. And you don't have to stay at the same employer for the entire 10 years that you will be paying the payments. You can absolutely start at your preliminary location, start with the program. When you go to your advanced residency, you'll just want to make sure that you get the employer verification form filled out at the at your preliminary station before you leave, so you make sure that's documented. If you go to, I think it's studentaid.gov, I think is where you'll want to start out. Just make sure I'm giving you the right location to get you started. No. Find. Nothing like being on camera when I'm trying to figure out where you go for the, let's see.
Studentaid.gov is the site. I don't know if that's the one you're talking about.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah.
Mhm.
Student aid.
Studentaid.gov.
.gov, not org. Okay. Oh, they're tricky. This program that studentaid.gov. Yeah, if you go there, it has a lot of free information, education information on how to get started consolidating your loans. There are two big things that I want you all to know about before we start down this path. One is loan consolidation. Loan consolidation is when you take multiple loans and consolidate them into one loan. Now, if you're doing public service loan forgiveness, you do not want to consolidate direct loans and private loans to the same loan, because you will not be able to go for public service loan forgiveness if you do that. So before you consolidate, think twice before combining loans, because they all have to be the same type of loans, which are direct loans, to be consolidated to be still considered for public service loan forgiveness. The other thing is loan refinance. When you refinance your loans, you're taking it out of the governmental system and you're bringing it into the private sector. If you do that, that will exclude you from public service loan forgiveness. So most of the advice that we give to like brand new or like graduating medical students, you file your income taxes. If you're single, you'll have $0. That $0 will determine your $0 payment. What you'll want to do is take your direct loans, consolidate them into one loan. What that does is the grace period, which is 6 months before you have to start paying your payments. That grace period goes away, but that's okay. Why? Because you're making $0 payments, and you get more $0 payments under your belt toward the 120 payments that are required for public service loan forgiveness. Now, don't hate the player, hate the game if you want to, but the game of public service loan forgiveness is to maximize the number of low or $0 payments that you have in order to maximize public service loan forgiveness. I think that answered that first question. Or did I go off on a rabbit chase, Grace?
I think it got it. And the other question was from Sawyer, but he just said, "Hey Grace, I have a question on life insurance for new interns." So if he's still around and wants to ask,
go
ahead and unmute yourself.
Yeah. So is there any scenario where life insurance or a different policy is beneficial for new incoming interns in particular, on top of maybe what the residency is offering us?
So can I ask you a few personal questions?
Yep.
To narrow it down. They're not too personal, I promise. Do you have a significant other?
No.
Do you have any dependents, any children that you're responsible for?
No.
Do you have any parents that you're responsible for to help support financially?
No.
Okay, so for someone who is single, who doesn't have dependents, doesn't have any parents that depend on your paycheck, getting a term life insurance usually doesn't make a lot of sense. Usually you'll want like a small policy. Probably the residency offers one for you that would be enough that should you die, there would be enough money there to pay for a funeral, so it doesn't like negatively impact anybody. It's a different question though, is, if you have a significant other, if you have children that depend on your paycheck, if you have family that depends on your paycheck, then looking at getting like a term life insurance policy makes a lot more sense. But unfortunately, a lot of programs, they'll have people come in and say, "Hey, I've got this whole life policy, whole life insurance policy. It's universal life, and it's great because you can put money in and you can borrow from it." It's a very expensive way to get life insurance. And these policies have two things. They have an investment portion and a life insurance portion. You are overpaying for the life insurance to get that investment. Usually it takes you about 10 years to break even on that. you're usually better off getting the term life insurance of like 20 years and then taking the difference between of what you would have paid to like a whole life insurance policy and investing it. And you could, more times than not, you do a lot better. But there are some residents that are single that really don't need life insurance because they don't have anyone depending on them. It doesn't mean you can't get it. You may decide, I'm going to get a small policy, but it would be lower down the list of things to prioritize spending your money on.
Awesome. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah. And someone asked for my short list. Usually go ahead and DM me. I like to get a little information and try and match up kind of what you're looking for and personality wise. And then I try and match them up on my short list of people. That way I can, and I can show you everyone that I follow. They're great, some great financial planners, but they offer kind of different services and kind of what you're looking for. I like to try and at least narrow it down for you a little bit instead of giving, 4 or 5 names. So you can kind of look it over. Since the loans are now 0% interest, should we be on the public service loan forgiveness even if we aren't making payments now? Yes. So before August, so the $0 payments are going away August 31st. Make sure that 1, you calculate how much your payment's going to be for September, and 2, get on an income-driven repayment plan and get that in place before that goes away. So you're able to take advantage of the and start going for public service loan forgiveness. Even if you're like, I'm probably going to get out and I'll just pay it all off, or I don't have much. The way things are changing so rapidly in the public service loan forgiveness, if you get into the program, it may be that they decide to forgive $10,000 in debt. They may, so many different things are out there right now. So absolutely get in the public service loan forgiveness program. Usually kind of the ratios that people talk about is if you have a student debt ratio to attending, you kind of look at it like student debt ratio to attending salary. If it's a 1-to-1, it's kind of a toss-up. What would be more helpful for you, going public service loan forgiveness or not? If it's like a 2-to-1, like if you have $400,000 in debt, you're going to be a pediatrician, then probably going public service loan makes a lot of sense. Once you get over that 2 and you get into the 3 and 4-to-1, absolutely you need to do public service loan forgiveness. So going back to disability insurance, staying at the group, and then the personal insurance before graduating, do you think this is cost-effective approach or just go personal from the start? Probably the easiest way to go is to get the personal policy in place while you're a resident. That'd probably be the most economical. But the group disability, depending on the group, may be really inexpensive for you, and it may help. I mean, really getting if you're able to get the personal disability insurance in place first, it would be probably the best for you to do. Absolutely. Thank you all for hanging out. I know that probably have a lot more fun things to do than hang out with me, but thanks for hanging out with me. Other questions? And we can talk about a different topic too. If you have 40K in a governmental student loans, should I still do the public service loan forgiveness? Will I need to make 120 payments for such a loan size? Yeah, for that amount of student loan debt, it probably doesn't make a lot of sense. You'll probably end up paying it off at an attending salary. However, in this environment, it may not be a bad way to go to do public service loan, at least for now, till you see how things shake out. Because, the nice thing about the public service loan forgiveness, it allows you to do income-driven repayment, which means for most residents and fellows, paying the full payment is just not economically feasible. You don't want to defer loans. I mean, right now we're in a quote unquote 0% deferral or $0 payments right now. You know, you may decide, and when you look at all your finances, that, hey, the 40 grand, I'm just gonna come up with a plan and pay it off. You know, ordinarily I would just tell people with that amount, it's probably not worth it. Go ahead and refinance. But it's so crazy because I may tell you to refinance, and then 2 weeks from now, they decide to do $10,000 of loan forgiveness. I don't know. It's such a hard thing to try and give the best information for you. It really is tough. One of the places that does a good job at keeping up with a lot of the changes is Student Loan Planner. I have no financial ties to them. They do student loan plans for people. And the way I think of student loan plans are 3 complexities, okay? The first complexity you have is you are single and you have student loans. That kind of thing you can pretty much figure out on your own how you want to manage that loan, public service loan forgiveness and what income-driven repayment plan and that kind of thing. The next complexity are you have a significant other, so you're married, and one of you has loans. How you pay that loan and how to minimize the payments to get the most debt forgiven depends on the state in which you live in and how you file your taxes. It gets complex. Once you start to get into that, may be worth it to get some help and have someone evaluate that. And definitely when you get to the point where you have 2 spouses, each of you have student loans, absolutely, I would recommend paying somebody to evaluate your situation, come up with a student loan plan. It will cost you somewhere between $300 and $600 for those plans. There are several different companies out there that do it. But having someone who's a certified student loan planner may be good to walk you through the process and come up with a student loan plan to maximize your forgiveness. And they may look at it, they would probably look at the 40K and say, you know, go ahead and refinance and then pay the lower payment. But in this environment of not knowing if they may just forgive 10,000, maybe that's in all loans, maybe that's just public service loan forgiveness. We don't know. It'd be interesting to kind of see what they say. So, other questions? Everyone's waiting for someone else to ask a question. And we can talk about a different topic. Or if you guys are like, I've had enough, I'm ready to go. I don't know. It's back in my day, we used to be so tied to when TV shows came on. Like, oh, it's 7 o'clock. I got to get to whatever. Now we just stream everything and binge watch. It's really awesome. So,
is it okay if I talk? My question.
Yeah, sure.
Like, do you think they'll give us a heads up if they say they're gonna forgive 5 or 10 grand? They're gonna tell us like where it'll fall, and we can adjust our loan accordingly.
I think so. I mean, there've been talk about. It's interesting because whenever they talk about, it's a hot topic to talk about. It brings up a lot of emotion with people, and some people have said, well, the debt forgiveness won't count if you're a physician, but you know, will they have kind of a means testing, which means if you earn over a certain amount of money, they won't forgive a certain percentage of debt, right? Well, for a resident, they may say, well, you know, if you earn over 200 grand, we won't forgive the loan. Well, as a resident, you would meet that criteria. I mean, all we know is kind of what information has been given out so far. We know that the $0 payments go away August 31st. And so kind of having a plan for how you're going to pay, like figure out how much the loan payment's going to be, so you can plan for that will be helpful. And also just kind of have a plan as to what income-driven payment plan you're going to go with. One of the things I hear are people don't trust the program. The program was actually written into the agreement that you signed when you signed for your student loans. It's buried in there. And so if there are going to be like major changes, like the program going away or something like that, it's going to be for new borrowers. So people that are already in the system are already in the system. Did that answer your question, Kason?
Yes, thank you so much.
Yeah.
For what it's worth, last weekend there was some reporting that the president was prepared to announce student loan forgiveness out of graduation last weekend, and then the school shootings, it wasn't the right time, and it was going to be $10,000 for single people making $120,000 or less, or married people making $300,000 or less.
Thank you for that. I totally missed that. I know there was talk about it.
It could change, but that was the plan then.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, I came late. Sorry. No worries. Can we talk about tax advantage retirement accounts if we haven't already? Currently just doing a Roth IRA as a resident. Unsure when to do an IRA, a SEP, a 529. So as a resident, let's start off with the basics. One, find out if you have a 403B or 401k at your employment. Now, your residency and your employer may be the same person, but it may be two separate entities. Okay, so find out, do I have a 403B or 401k that I can contribute to? There are some programs around the country that do not allow residents to do that. So let's start there. Once you find that out, then you'll want to find out if it is a Roth or traditional. Both Roth and traditional accounts, you put money into the account, it grows tax-free, and when in retirement, you pull it out. Now, the difference between the two flavors, Roth versus traditional, is where you pay the income tax. For traditional, you pay the tax at the end. So you put money in, you get a tax break, it grows tax-free. When you pull the money out, you pay taxes on it. For Roth, you pay the tax before you put the money in, it grows tax-free, and then when you pull the money out, you don't have to pay taxes on it. In retirement, you're going to have 4 different places to build your retirement paycheck. One is traditional money, one is Roth, one is brokerage, and one is Social Security. Having a mix of all 4 of those, you can kind of pull from different accounts to minimize how much taxes you pay. That is a discussion way down the line, but I like having a little Roth money because it gives you options. And as an anesthesiologist, I love options. So that's what I want to go with. So what do I do? Do I do a Roth or traditional? What do I do with that? So depends if you're in the public service loan forgiveness program. If you're if you're trying to minimize your payments, then going traditional may be the way to go to save you on payments to maximize how much money you get forgiven in the future. Now, some people may do enough money in traditional to get the match, and then they decide to do a Roth IRA on their own. However you do it is fine as long as you do something. I mean, residency is about building habits. You want to build good habits so that when you get out as an attending, they're instilled in you and you kind of move forward. So, an IRA, a SEP. So an IRA is individual retirement agreement. That is a personal retirement account. A 403B or 401k is an employer-based account, okay? A SEP is actually a type of IRA. So for most residents, you wouldn't qualify for that because you have to be self-employed. And a 529 is actually an education account that you would save like for your kids for college. In my opinion, you want to put your oxygen mask on first yourself before you help those around you. So saving for your retirement account, especially as a resident, is a good habit to build. Once you get out, and if you have more money, then absolutely saving for your kids' college is a good way to go if that's one of the goals that you have in your financial life. And part of that is getting organized and figuring out what is really important to me. You can always get loans for school. You can't get loans for retirement. So the more money you can kind of put away into retirement, and get that started and build that habit and build that muscle and put in the reps, it's kind of a good way to get started to build your financial life. Does that help answer your question? And you can always just unmute and come on too.
Hi, thank you so much. And I want to do a question. It's kind of tricky.
Okay.
And as you mentioned, the most important thing during residency in terms of investment is to get into the habit of saving something for investment every month, and versus the amount that you can actually put away. But is there actually a threshold or a amount of money invested per month or per year that actually makes a difference in the long term, in terms of compound interest and those type of things?
So instead of thinking of like actual dollar amounts, I think it's helpful to do percentage wise.
Okay.
And that way you get in the habit of doing a percentage. And that way, when you have your budget as a resident, you get used to a certain percentage going away, and for residency, I kind of like the way Tyler has the analogy of in residency, you're just kind of treading water, just kind of tread water. Try not to add more debt. Try to build those habits and not worry too much about the percentage that you're putting away, but put something away. I think when you look for the perfect plan, no one does a perfect plan, but you'll do the good enough plan, and that's okay. So it's okay to be good enough with this kind of thing. So start off with a percentage that makes sense for your budget. Some parts of the country that 65 grand doesn't go very far, and you may not be able to put very much away, but putting something away is helpful. One, you build a habit, which you brought up, but also that money is going to compound and grow tax-free as you like move to retirement. And what I used to do for our residents, I used to crunch numbers. If you max out your retirement with the match over 3 years, or 4 years for us, because we're anesthesia, at retirement, how much money will that be? And the compound effect, you don't really see the money compounding in interest. You see a little bit in the beginning, but really where the compounding happens is later in life. And so, the money that you're able to put away as a resident, you absolutely will be able to use in retirement. And the other thing about retirement accounts, you are limited as to how much you can put in every year. So as an attending, you may choose to max it out, but you're not able to go back in years prior and max out what you couldn't max out during residency. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, even if you start off with a small percentage, and you may do something, if you're not investing at all, one easy way to do it is just start with something so simple, it's so easy, and you get the ball rolling. So start with 1%. I'm going to put 1% in, or even better, if I can put enough in to get the match from my employer, start there, and then maybe build 1% and decide for the next 3 months, I'll do 1%, and then I'll add another 1%, maybe another 2%. As you kind of grow the percentage that you're putting away into retirement, you will adjust your lifestyle so that you won't miss it as much. And it's much better to go that way than to start trying to pile a bunch in and then worry about going into debt, or making payments, making loan payments, or making rent or food or something like that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Absolutely. Okay, any other questions, or we can wrap up? And you can always DM Tyler or myself. He definitely has a lot more experience than I do with some of the financial planning topics. I've learned a lot over the years, and I enjoy this topic. And if you don't enjoy it, you can always find a good planner to help you out. So as I tell people, there are very few catastrophic decisions you will make as a resident for your financial life. And plan doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be good enough to get started. And sometimes good enough to get started is okay. And you're going to learn. So in finances, especially as a resident building those habits, you are going to win and you're going to learn. Even if you lose some money in the process, you're going to learn from the process. So I think Tyler gave them some good good resources to go with. Grace, did we have anything else that top through?
May I ask a question?
Oh, absolutely.
Like, is it bad to not save so much and like just with inflation and whatnot? I'd rather work an extra year as an attending in the long run, like before retiring, rather than save up like 5-10 grand and try to cut corners or you know what I mean? It's really difficult to save at the moment.
No, great question. So, and if I could rephrase it, if that's okay.
Please.
It's finding the balance between enjoying life now and saving for the future. And that is a sweet spot. And for everybody, it's going to be a little different. I was at I gave a lecture to some residents and they said, well, what do you think about Starbucks coffee? You know, what about budgets? I heard you can't ever buy Starbucks coffee because it's too expensive. And if you save that $4 a day for 30 years, you know, you'll have like, you know, $40,000 in retirement. And I said, well, that's great to have 40 grand, but 30 years of misery isn't worth 40 grand. So I think for residents, just trying to find that balance between saving and enjoying your life. Be sure to enjoy life. The Starbucks is taken directly from it. Oh, did they do a double AMC? Did a PowerPoint about it?
Yeah. It's like about making wise financial choices to manage your student loans.
Look, here's the deal. My post-call meal was this. I would go to Starbucks. I would get a grande latte with 2 raw sugars. I'd go to Whataburger, get 2 breakfast potato, egg, and cheese taquitos. I would eat them when I got home, drink the Starbucks, get on the couch with the dogs, and take a nap. That was like my happy place. So, you know, don't feel like you've got to scrimp so much to save up for the future that you miss out enjoying today. And it's all about balance. So find your balance in what you want to do. And really as a resident, I think, unfortunately, residents hear a lot of the advice that we give to attendings. And you're like, oh my gosh, I don't know how I can save that much money because I just can't. In some residencies, you won't be able to, and that's okay. So find your balance, enjoy the time that you have, because it makes no sense to save so tightly that you miss out on life and you don't do things you would have done and you're a miser and then you retire miserable, you know, 5 years earlier than you could have otherwise. It just doesn't make sense. So find the balance. And only you can answer that question. Part of that goes back to your goals. What is important to you? And that may be spending time with your significant other. That may be travel. But finding your balance is important.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was the residents were so relieved when I'm like, it's okay to get coffee at Starbucks. It's okay. Just build it into your budget. Make a plan for it. I had, as a resident, I had $25 a month that I spent on coffee, and that was my budget. And I loaded it on my Starbucks card, and that's what I used. And when it was done, it was done. And so just have a plan. I mean, that's the biggest thing that people can do is having a plan for themselves. Okay.
Thank you. If I could ask, if somebody, like, if I don't want to retire, I know some people that are like, oh, I want to hit 65 and that's it. I don't want to work. What if I'm someone that I enjoy working and I see myself as the 90-year-old attending that still shows up? Like, is that change how I plan?
So what I would propose is this. Most people will retire 3 to 5 years before they think they want to retire. Okay. So like as a young attending, you'll have it in your head, if I can be so bold as to use 65, because I'm going to retire at 65. What most planners will say is, okay, let's plan on you retiring at 60. And the reason why, if you save up for financial independence, which you become work optional, meaning you have enough in your retirement that you could retire any day, then you don't have to retire. You can continue to work. And there's some attendings that I know that have failed retirement. They saved up, they retired, they were there for like 3 months and they got bored and they came back to work. And they enjoy work. They enjoy the people, they enjoy what they do. So there is nothing wrong with your plan to like, I'm gonna work into my 90s, but I would propose to save and, don't make that be your retirement plan. Like I'll just work to my 90s, because there are a lot of things out of your control that may change. You may be at a job and you get disabled. You may, life, like a lot of retirees around this time right now, COVID hit and they're like, oh my gosh, I do not want to deal with this. I'm out. There are people with the EMR that the electronic medical record, that became too stressful and they left. There are so many things that are out of your control that at least if you save up as if you're going to retire 5 years earlier than you expect to, and you continue working, then it's just gravy. What would you think about that?
That sounds really good. Like you said, just aim for a number, and if you go past it, you go past it. I feel like that's...
There's no one out there that will force you to retire because you have enough money to retire. Now they may force you to retire because stuff happens. Man, I've met attendings that they are not on their game as much as they were when they came out as a resident. I mean, you just start to slow down, and maybe it's not healthy for you. Maybe it's not safe for patients. And so having that option to retire at a reasonable age and then continuing to work is a great way to go.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Okay, well, I think we're going to wrap it up. Grace, thanks for hanging out with me a little bit later. Oh, you're muted.
Oh, I just said, of course.
Oh, so thank you very much. Thank you all for taking the time. You have Tyler and mine contact information on Twitter. Thank you again for coming to hang out and increasing your financial literacy, and we'll see you around on the Bird app. So I wish you all the best in your training, in your career, and thank you for adding to the discussion. I like these because I always learn something, so it's great. All right. Bye. Thanks again, Grace. Really appreciate all your help.
Of course. Make sure it gets out. Okay, I'm going to stop the recording.